Hi you guys, Mickey here. I hope you're doing well. I have a videographer to help me today, and so we're going to do another tour of the garden. For those that don't know, this is an urban or suburban food forest project that was started on an empty lot, and it is in finishing its 5th year. So it's had a little time for things to grow and develop. So if you're new to Inwood, Eden, then come on and we'll take the tour. So this is a good example for the timing. Things are a little slower here because we are growing all of this without irrigation. But this is a citrus tree that was planted the very first year. It still took us a few months to build up some soil and trust that we could keep it alive. But this has been in the ground almost 4 years, or almost 5 years, over 4 years. And it also got froze back pretty severely. We had 21 and 22 degrees 2 consecutive nights this last winter. This is a chamuti, sweet orange. So the damage here on the papaya is from Hurricane Harvey. Papaya is a very, very shallow rooted plant, and so being waterlogged just killed all of its roots. So it's coming back as cuttings. There's always something cool to see and something cool to talk about. Right here we have bees working a plant called frog fruit, Phyla nodiflora. This is a plant that, along with the passion fruit, were here when we got the property. It was a big open field, but this wildflower was thriving in that harsh competitive environment, and we've had even more frog fruit come in because of the disturbance that we've created. So frog fruit is really great with compaction, and it's pretty darn good with being smothered as well. So it's always around, and especially in the driveway. So the bees are really busy. We passed the hive already, so working the frog fruit. This is the beginning of the fall flow here in Houston, and there are 9 hives on the property that we'll get to see. But this is a big part of the fall flow. This is goldenrod, and these are very, very close to opening up. So this weed is, I say weed, this plant, because it's a really great plant, is just everywhere, roadsides, you know, kind of waste spaces, and it's all over our property. Not something that I put here for sure, something that I rip out all the time because it's very prolific, but something that has a really, really strong flow of nectar in the fall just because of the quantity it creates, but also how prevalent it is. And right behind it you'll see a persimmon tree. This was not planted the first year, it was a 2nd year planting, so that means it's almost 4 years in the ground. And again, all of these were unirrigated, so they're going to be a little bit smaller than what you would see in a conventional setting. But this is a Fuyu persimmon, and a Fuyu persimmon is a non-astringent persimmon, which means that you can eat them when they're hard and even a little green like this. So it's crunchy, but still sweet, a lot like an apple at this stage, but you can also let them soften on the counter and have your regular mushy persimmon. So we have a lot of Mexican milkweed. I try to keep it out here for the butterflies, and then Turk's cap is another great valuable plant that every at least southern food forest garden should have. The flowers are really good and edible, but all parts of this plant are edible. And this is as native, as wild, as tough as it gets out here. This is just a mallow. So it's Malva viscus is the genus, arboreus, but Turk's cap, and you can eat the leaves as well. So, camera woman, you interested in a flower? So if you are eating Turk's cap, you want to find one that has the pistil coming out, because that means that there will be more nectar in the bottom. These haven't quite opened up, and there will be less nectar than in this one, but I'll take that off. And there you go. For your foragers out there, that's the subtle thing, but they're great. I mean, sweet and good in salads, and if you catch them at just the right time, they're yummy. I need to stop eating this. You want to finish it?
Yes.
So the Turk's cap right here is actually hiding an apple tree. A big part of this project was pushing limits for competition and allowing plants to really duke it out. So what I do is I often come in and I just leverage one over the other. So like here where the Turk's cap is mixing with the apple, I feel right now that it's competition where they both are gaining from it. That stress is helping them to be stronger. But in a little while, the Turk's cap might be taking more light than it should from the apple, especially if it was spring and there were apples on the tree, because this one is productive. Then I would go in and cut some Turk's cap out, make sure it got some light. But for right now, it's like a Turk's cap tree. So we're walking on some urbanite, some rubble. I like to make use of the resources of the city. It's kind of helping to maintain the paths, and this is all mint that likes to grow in wet spaces and in rocks. So it's had competitive advantage. It just ended up here. I planted a little plant probably 10 feet that way, and it ended up where it could survive because of the disturbance regime. So that's another cool thing that I'm getting to learn a lot of just around here. The pomegranate, there's a dwarf peach bonanza, more of the goldenrod about to make a lot of honey. There's a kumquat underneath a really large Pakistan mulberry. So Pakistan mulberry is an incredible mulberry. It's just a little bit tricky here. I've had, 1 year all the mulberries were lost to a late freeze, and then this year it had a lot of damage from the hard freeze. So it's kind of like borderline too tropical for us, or just too finicky. So the tree doesn't look good, but this is the third set of fruit it's put on. So these are all the individual little pistils there to get pollinated, and I think it'll grow out of it. It's got some big wounds on these trunk pieces, but it's had 9 months now to grow since the hard freeze. So we will continue. As you can see, we're just tromping along in wild spaces, but all of a sudden there's a nice little satsuma, and then this one, you can see it's a bit smaller. This has only been in the ground 2 years. Basically, it was a late summer planting, so it wasn't a spring planting, so maybe a little over 2 years. But it made it through the hard freeze, which is huge, and it's doing well. Here's one of our blueberries. You will see other blueberries. I'll try and remember to point them out, but we do our blueberries in a wicking pot system. So there's actually a reservoir pot under here, because all of this is unirrigated, and the only irrigation this will get is if I bring a bucket of water to it. So I try to avoid that, and it's going well so far. They're quite productive in the pots, and yeah, I'll probably make a video on it. The blueberry soil is kind of important, not getting in the city water, so there'll be another video on that. So right here, there's quite a few of these across the property, and these are pecans that came in bags of leaves. So a lot of this project is sustained by the bringing in of organic matter, because that's what we had available. We're just, we're artists playing with the resources we have available, but what that meant was we were getting all kinds of seeds and interesting things in these bags. So like a lot of specific plants came to this property through the bags of leaves, and you can get the really invasive weeds, but you can also get cool things, and pecan is one of them. I've gotten less cool, but a lot of elephant ears often come in bags of leaves, cannas, things that get divided. I got some bird of paradise from bags of leaves. The bridal Gibasis geniculata, just other random stuff that will just start showing up if you bring in that outside stuff. But anyway, these are getting grafted. I'm really excited for next spring. So they're finally big enough to do some cleft grass and have some potentially really productive pecan trees. So we're gonna skip this guy. This oak tree has been cut down 3 times now. You just kind of let him grow back up and then cut him down when the time's right. So more goldenrod, you can see really close to blooming. And then this is loofah, which is a really great plant, but not intentionally planted here. This has been a weed for the last 2 years. I don't know if you guys can see, but we're going to look straight through. I'm trying not to get poked by this agave. Yank. There's a nice big loofah hanging over there in the middle, right by that little mandarin, and this is a pomegranate. They're really close, and again, this is something where I'm doing it knowing that they are going to be challenging each other. But one is because we're really limited on space, and two is oftentimes that I'm going to plan on culling one of them, and probably it's going to be the pomegranate because they just never really perform here. But it was seeing how they might help each other out for the time that they're together and how they grow with that intense connection. Let's see, we got roses in the garden too. Things are starting to look up. So this is probably our number 1 weed if we just talk about the plants, like when we look out this way and what we're seeing. This is pepper vine, Ampelopsis arborea, and really common weed. It was something that was here from the very beginning, and something that I love-hate relationship. It definitely is out there and always climbing up in the trees and smothering them, but really the first 2 summers it saved the life of some of my fruit trees by covering them. We have such intense heat, like the solar intensity burns these leaves, and so a lot of what I come in and do, I mean, we can see some here, but I know that this pear tree is strong and it doesn't need any help, but I'll let the pepper vine go up the tree and get a nice cover during the summer, and then I'll pull it off. And that pulse, sometimes I don't pulse it well, you know, sometimes I let it go too far, and sometimes maybe I don't pulse it at all, but just that stressing, I think, has helped a lot of our plants. So what you're seeing are strong plants that are unirrigated, that are surviving. I mean, we just walked under a nice big productive peach tree, this guy. I mean, it's a nice one. Eva's Pride, and I think the other graft is Mid Pride, but you know, they're doing their thing, and they're doing it without irrigation. So watch your steps. There is a path, but it's not clear right now. So this is cassava right here that I'm pushing on, and the reason it fell over was because the hurricane killed all of its roots. So why don't you walk underneath, and it's a good plant, but so we had Hurricane Harvey, which dumped a lot of rain. The winds weren't so bad, but the saturation was tough. So we saw the papaya with damage. Jujube is another one that does not like wet feet. And this tree, if you can't tell, has a slight lean. That's also from Hurricane Harvey. But jujube, here's what the fruit looks like. I'm learning a lot about them. This is just tiger's tooth, which is an ungrafted, well, not ungrafted, it's on its own roots. Some of them are grafted, not that they need to be, but it's not the industry standard or anything. It's a little more wild of a cultivar, but you don't have to worry about the suckers or anything because it's ungrafted. So this is a underripe. They'll turn brown and kind of get shrivelly when they're really good, but it's kind of appley, pithy, definitely not as sweet as an apple, but it's a really strong tree, and I've enjoyed learning about it and watching it grow. Leaves. So I have a lot of trouble with rabbits. This is a new banana that I got, Rajapuri. So it's pretty common, but it's still a cultivar that I bought. And the rabbits have been eating the banana trees. They're tough out here. They're doing their thing. And we've walked past, I mean, we walked under that pear. We've got aloysia. This is a really great bee plant. There are a lot of things growing. There's kidney wood. That's the one I was, so if you see the white flowers right there that the bees are working right now, that's another one. And it looks really similar to the aloysia, which is the sweet almond verbena. But both of them have a nice flower for the bees and smell good. This one smells really good, the aloysia. So there's a plum tree and more papaya. And now I need to stop eating and talking. Now we're kind of at the back of the property, getting towards the pond, which is in a low spot. This is a blood orange that it's not as big as the others because it's gotten a little less sunlight, and right now there's a cassava that fell over from the water logging on it, but it's been productive in the years past. I took all the fruit off. It got quite damp. Everything, that hard freeze really set us back. So like, here's an avocado where I did all I could, you know, to protect this thing, and I had bags of leaves piled up about this high with the wood block to hold it all in, and I was really trying to keep them alive, but it froze down to about here, and like everything. And in the 9 months since, it's doubled in height, which is really cool. This is Lila or Opal. I think that's the same name, or same cultivar under different names. And so yeah, so we're in a kind of an open space in the back. Here's another one of the blueberries in pots. This one had a lot of damage from drying out. So it is something where it's not irrigation free. I couldn't just walk away from them like I wanted to be able to. But if I keep an eye on them or keep thinking about them, I know when to bring a bucket, and I can put so much water in there because of that reservoir that I can get away with doing it, you know, once a month during the summer, or even less if we get the rain. Here's a couple more bees. They really busy this time of year, and I need to get into them just because either to add supers or to make my splits now. Because yeah, beginning of the fall flow. Okay, so we had some trouble with the camera overheating, but it's better now, and we even got the sun behind the cloud. So while we were hanging out and talking, we saw some cool things back here. This is some cowpeas, and the cool thing about this is that this was seed that was just broadcast. So not, you know, seed bomb, not anything more than handfuls of cowpeas being thrown out into lawn, because this was basically shorter back then, more like the St. Augustine. It was thickish, but big seeds like this can come up, you know, through, and so there's a lot of seed there. You can eat beans when they're green, even if they're not green beans. And there's even a few more I saw. So here's one. So here's seed, and this seed can go right back. I don't mind the cowpea as a weed, but all it took was that much, and that's kind of cool. And also because this sort of meadow that we see behind us, it's got a lot of Eupatorium. I'm stuck on the common name. Eupatorium fulicine. All right. Anyway, it's got a lot of wildflowers and things, and they actually benefit from this sort of pulse. So being cut, like brush hogged or weed-eated, often benefits one thing over another. So grass benefits from the highest level of disturbance. So like mowing, you know, bi-weekly, you're gonna end up with grass. But if you just shift your disturbance regime to like out there once yearly, barely. Right now it's kind of on this succession moving past that because it's been over a year since it's been disturbed. But that, you know, pulse still, but further spread apart, just brings in different plants. And I think that's such a cool aspect to this whole garden and permaculture and how it works. So yeah, and this is bees working the Brazilian verbena. So this is maybe called invasive, but it's still producing some nectar, and I've seen a lot of other insects work it as well. This is one, so I said on the start of the flow, so this is Baccharis, groundsel bush, Baccharis halimifolia. We've got flies, we've got bees, and they're all working this fall flow. So this is a cool plant. Usually, just for some reason, it's always been blooming in coinciding with the love bugs, and it just missed this year. So love bugs were like a month ago, but in the spring they coincide and this thing will be covered. Really fragrant, also just a native weed that pops up everywhere. So if you squeeze out here with me, you'll see our pond. So this was a low area on the property that was already standing water, maybe just a couple inches deep. And so rather than allow it to be a mosquito cesspool, we just rented a bobcat and dug it about 4 feet deep. It's kind of settled in since, but now it has mosquito fish and it's just full of life. You can see lots of cattails. They blew in on the wind. So that's the cool, I mean, I always get excited about different things, but just how seeds move around, and then once you have that species there and they're established, they leave their mark and they influence that system. So the water hyacinth is a plant that came in a bag of leaves, trash bag. That's how I got the water hyacinth. The lilies I got from a friend. The kangkong is from seed. This is a good plant to grow. I'm gonna try not to get wet. So this is it's an Ipomea. I don't remember the species, but they call it water lettuce. And it's a really great one. So related to sweet potato, morning glory. Will freeze out completely, but good warm season, grow in the water, edible. And more cowpea right here. Just throw those seeds around. Oops. So we're gonna pause the video and go and start at a new place. Hopefully you saw some of the life here. You can almost hear them. There's so many bees and things. There's a lot going on, a busy day. Alright, so welcome to the jungle. That's kind of the threshold for this section. And again, it's a wild space that is finally taking its form. It is, really, this has been open, like it was even vegetable gardens. When we first started, we built some hexagonal beds and grew lettuce and carrots, and that's how much sun was here. And just finally did it start to shift. So those little trees and those little pots eventually start to change, and we're right at that threshold. If you look up high, there's fig, nectarine, and cassava. Eventually this is going to be food forest, and so we're making the most of the light at the lower levels while we can, but I can totally see how it's shifting away from that. How every system where there's adequate rainfall is going to shift away from that. And so we've designed in our species that we like, and we're moving from there. When we first had lots of sun, so let's see, we'll start here. Here's persimmon. Now this is a non-astringent in the back, the one with fruit on it. And what I did, so this one's been in the ground almost 4 years. This one in the front has been in the ground almost 3 years. So it was a whole year later that it got planted. And the reason I planted it was from an observation I had back in college. So we had non-astringent persimmons and astringent persimmons side by side, and they were in a field row, just like conventional agriculture, and their branches, they were big old trees, more of like a display orchard, and so the branches mixed, and where they mixed, there always were a few more non-astringent persimmons that made it. And so what I was hoping was that this is Saijo, and that's the Makawa hero, just another Fuyu relative, that they would kind of mix, and that I could get them to kind of grow together. Now in hindsight, I probably should have just grafted two on the same, but yeah, I thought that was the plan at least, and I'm not afraid of that competition. Here's one of the older plants. So this is, the blueberries went in, the very beginning, the winter of the second year. So this is 4 years in the ground, and this is a real strong blueberry plant. And this is a cool thing because our underlying pH is over 8, and so it's taken a good bit of sulfur. This is in a raised planter, so it started away from that high pH soil. It's got no barrier though, and it started, I've used pine logs to make a raised bed, planted it in an appropriate blueberry mix, you know, peat and bark and all that, and just added sulfur every year. It's my once yearly thing to sulfur the blueberries, and so far it's proven very possible, doable. You know, so I wouldn't suggest anyone go and plant blueberries in our Houston soil, but if you raise them up in the bed, it can be done. And this one is Abundance. So that's the name of the cultivar. We can go a little bit this way. We might have to double back. So behind the blueberry, there's still valuable plants. And all that we're seeing, I sometimes forget to point them all out, but there's a kumquat right here. And this is intentional, a little bottle brush. On this side, we have our papaya, which these are all coming back after that hard freeze. More papaya with fruit, and then some wild peppers. So these are not wild in the sense that they're able to reproduce themselves. This is a plant that got brought in as a transplant. They are not there yet, or my system isn't there. You know, there's too much mulch going down in the winter season, but they're able to make it through the summer and make a lot of peppers. So there's another beehive back there by the cassia, and you see the carpenter bees working the cassia. That's the cassia alata. It's a good one. It's a little big for this kind of food forest. It's taken a lot of space. And this path got blocked, so I shouldn't have even brought us here, but there was a giant moringa that fell over from the storm. So the saturation did take its toll from Hurricane Harvey, and we had some losses. But yeah, we can go back that way. Right in front of you is avocado and some turmeric. The turmeric is being protected from the rabbits, which really like turmeric and ginger and bananas. This is an avocado that it's a grafted, fantastic avocado, and it's in its 3rd year. So it will be 3 years next spring that it's been in the ground. So it's had some winters. It had a good bit of damage. It had a good bit of just getting shaded out. Me, you know, just kind of allowing it to sit. But it's got some strength in it. It's getting there. Here's some Egyptian spinach, great plant. Gonna flower and make more seeds. And this one, as soon as there's less mulch going down and there are these edges, I know for sure this one, I've seen it come up. It just needs a little bit less covering all the time when it wants to sprout in the spring, but makes a lot of seed, very viable. So there are some citrus despite the freeze. Look at that big guy. I didn't really intend for there to be any on this Mars sweet orange, but they snuck past me, and now they're so big we might as well leave them. And this is our time of year for papayas. Always, you know, sometimes if you have a mild winter, you start getting papayas in Houston in like, you know, June, May or June. But we didn't have that, so all these had to come back from stumps. And so now we're getting our papayas finally in September. This is a really great fig because this is only finishing its 3rd year in the ground. This thing exploded. We just had a lot of rich, fertile soil, and it was a 3-gallon, but you know, like a 4 or 5 foot tall cutting with a few branches. But just, you know, when they have that momentum, it does make a difference. And this is putting on fruit for the 3rd time this year. So you'll see some of them right up here. This is LSU Gold, which is a big green or gold fig, and I usually don't get many of them. The birds get them all, and that's okay. Here's another blueberry in the ground or in a raised bed. This is Jewel, and this is a grafted pineapple guava. I think it's Mammoth. So they're all mixed in. These are a little close, but I actually intended all of the blueberries to eventually be phased out for loss of light. So we get blueberries while we can, and eventually, you know, the pineapple guava will be a lot taller, and there'll be other, you know, there'll be other things that take its place. We're getting loquats for the first time this year, so the big tree in the back. That's a great plant to grow if you're a Houston permaculture person. That's a seedling, 5 years from a seed to a tree that's making fruit. And that's 5 years, that's why they say the best time to plant a fruit tree is 5 years ago. Exactly right, that's how it works. So we've got, so I tried to grow chayote squash, that's this guy. It needs irrigation. It's not something that can be grown wild. Like I've done loofah, I've done the birdhouse gourds, lagenaria, any of that can go wild. This plant has proven, it's the second trial, it needs irrigation. It doesn't make it through the heat. There's a persimmon tree. This guy is going to get grafted onto, but this kind of shows what a lot of these other trees looked like. Here, you can come, why don't you stand in the shade? Here, come forward. All right, sorry. The pepper vine is up kind of like half smothering this persimmon, and if you catch the pepper vine early enough, you can just kind of pull on it and it just comes right out. And that's what, I mean, I'm really learning to love this plant. But a lot of the trees that we just saw, the avocados, the persimmons, they looked exactly like this with pepper vine in them less than a month ago. I just came in and cleaned them out on that pulse. I came in and I spent all of like 2 minutes pulling on some pepper vine and saying, hey, you know, come on out of there. Sometimes it pulls right down. And this is giant ragweed. I can say, hey, and just wiggle it out. Now the I also can just cut it and leave it, so I'm not even too concerned with that. But the pepper vine has value. You know, the pepper vine is making nectar when there's no nectar in the middle of June and July. So it's got its value in this system. So we've got galangal ginger that is finally strong enough that the rabbits leave it alone. They really don't like gingers. And some nice Pekin peppers that are doing their thing. This is Job's tears, which is, you know, like it looks like corn. It's a ornamental grass grown for its seeds. It's got some really cool seeds. We're gonna kind of have to check through. Oh, and in addition, so this whole trellis, I know we're really close, but was supposed to be winged bean. So right down here, these are winged beans, which is a tropical. All right, so we had the camera overheat again when we were talking about winged bean. So these are winged beans that you want to harvest them when they're tender and immature. These are like just starting to get a little too far. It's very tasty as a green bean, and it's a really cool plant in that it can grow with other things. So you could get winged bean growing in a fruit tree, a productive tree, without hindering that tree hardly at all. So it's not the kind of plant like a pepper vine wants to swamp and cover. It's a little bit better about that, about sharing the light. It basically doesn't have a lot of leaf surface area for the amount of food that it produces. And this was going to be all winged bean, but the rabbits really liked winged bean seedlings, and so these are probably all from just one, maybe two plants that made it across this whole trellis, and the rest is just pepper vine. So before we go much farther, this is Jamaican sorrel. There's a couple of these on the property. It's a great plant. It's nice acidic leafy green, and here are the flower buds. So the part that they use, like in hibiscus tea and everything, this is this plant, is the calyxes, that after these flowers open, this outer part will get really juicy and swell up, and it's a little bit sweeter than the leaf basically, so it's got that tart and sweet, good flavor, but the greens, absolutely edible, you know, as like a staple. Acidity, you watch your acidity, but good to eat. Uh-oh, tangled. Watch your step, it's a jungle. So here we've had some major disturbance. So in the back you see the nectarine, and here's this big open space. This was all filled by a moringa tree that fell that direction. And we'll see the top of it, you know, probably 25 feet tall, maybe even more. Right here though, something that has benefited from the time of year, because it's finally not as hot as it was during the summer, but the extra light, is this habanero. So let me finish eating this. There's some pretty peppers that have been set. This is a red, it'll finish to red, and there's a red one that's ready. Back there, a little habanero. No, I'm not that crazy. So the other thing that we were doing here, I was doing here, the moringa was a temporary crop, seen as something that I was going to be able to move around easily. You know, that entire 25 feet was grown in 1 year. It's a plant that is often froze to the ground here, so it's something that is movable, whereas this apple wasn't. And so it was just an opportunity to have moringa while the apple tree is establishing. So this is I wanted to have another cultivar. This is Carnival apple, southern cultivar apple, and it's actually really spindly. One, because it maybe had a little bit of swamping by vines, but mostly it's taking a little while. The apples and our really high pH soil are not friends, so I might come back with some sulfur. But the cool thing is either they take or they don't. When things are allowed to compete in a natural setting, like interact with all these other things, either this apple tree is going to finally get its footing and just like explode like the other apple trees, or it's going to die, and then I get to just plant something else. So either way, but this is probably going on 2 years and it has not put on much, so we'll see. Here's a nice pineapple guava. This is a cool one because it had a ton of vine pressure. So like here I'm pulling out passion vine, and there's pepper vine. But I feel like this plant and I have a really great relationship because of how many times I've come in and saved its life, basically. Where it's been like sheet on top, and I'll come in, I'll cut every one and pull them out, and that's the kind of interaction that has a lot of value with plants. There's something about that. So this is new planting. This is Falsa, Grewia asiatica. It's like a, I think, tropical mulberry. And I haven't grown it before, so this is new. This is just me adding things. But supposedly it can do well, because even though it will freeze in our hard freezes, it can come back and fruit on first year's growth. And so this is protection from the rabbits, because not only do they eat the Falsa, I saw, but they also eat that turmeric, so they'd be chewing on it. So I just recently cut that pepper vine, that's why it's all dead. There's a nice thick passion vine with this one that has dropped a lot of fruit over here. Passion fruit is ripe when it lands on the ground, so I'll keep my eyes open. And then there's lots of cassava, because there was other cassava in that mix that had fallen over, and I just decided to yank them. Like this is one that has fallen over and probably should be yanked. This is the moringa, top of the tree, completely blocking our path. There's another blueberry, so we won't go that way, because not for now. So this is what pineapple guava look like. If you see right here behind my hand. I'm not going to pick it because pineapple guava is a fruit that's only ripe when it falls to the ground. You can kind of shake the tree and get the ripe enough ones to fall, but it's best to just wait and harvest off the ground. And that's the same with the passion fruit that we just saw. So here's a little satsuma that's been in the ground a long time but a little shaded out. So this is 4-year-old plant that continually is getting damaged by rabbits. That's a big pressure here, is rabbit pressure. So they're chewing down there, just knocking off limbs left and right, and frustrating me. So let's see. There's some peppers. You guys are fine. I noticed this the other day, but this is kind of rebounded. This is a Anaheim or poblano pepper, and this is really showing the light level that peppers really thrive in. So a conventional agriculture person is going to grow peppers in full sun. In Houston, they're the best part sun plant you can find. They fruit really well in part sun. They make it through the summers better, because this is a perennial plant. So here, you know, there's the big kumquat that's casting shade on it. We've got goldenrod, we've got passion vine up over it. It's getting a really nice filtered light, and this guy is growing without irrigation. I did bucket water, well, once on its planting last spring, but maybe once or twice at the end of July. There was like a week or two that was really tough. So I say no irrigation, but basically growing on his own, growing without much help. So that's kind of cool. And right back there, behind the jungle, is where we started. And so I think that's enough tour for today.